It began on a morning that looked like every other morning. The sky above the Atlantic was gray, heavy with static. At the edge of orbit, where Earth's shadow meets sunlight, a single object drifted in silence. A capsule, scarred by centuries, its metal skin flaking like rusted memory. For 7 days, it had circled the planet unnoticed. No radar pinged it. No satellite logged its orbit. It was invisible to everything that should have seen it. Until Dr. Elias Corr saw it first. He wasn't supposed to. He was a time archaeologist. A man who studied signals buried in the noise of history, not things that fell from the sky. But that morning, while combing through transmission anomalies from the outer ring, one signal repeated itself over and over with mechanical patience. A pulse. Short. Long. Short. Long. Then silence. Then the pattern again. At first, he thought it was interference. Cosmic background radiation, or debris, bouncing the signal between dead satellites. But then the pattern shifted. It began to spell his name. He sat there in the observation chamber, coffee gone cold, watching the letters appear on his screen. ELIAS. Then LISTN. He stared at the monitor for a long time before he moved. 2 hours later, a recovery drone brought the capsule down to the Atlantic relay station. It was smaller than expected, shaped like a bullet. Covered in frost and old insignias no one recognized. Carbon dating said it was ancient. Metallic resonance said it wasn't from any known fabrication process. Inside, wrapped in vacuum, sealed mesh, was a single recorder. He played it alone. Static filled the room first. A thick, distorted haze. Then, through the interference, a voice emerged. Human, calm, tired. This message is not from the past. It's from what's left of the future. Elias froze. The voice continued, halting, almost hesitant. If you're hearing this, you still have time. My name is Dr. Elias Corr. I'm speaking to myself. He stopped the playback immediately. Checked the file header, the encryption key, the timestamp. Everything was wrong. The signal modulation didn't match any known frequency on Earth. The compression ratio was impossible. Like the data had traveled through time itself. He played it again. Our world is gone. Time fractured, folded in on itself. The collapse began when we reached too far, when we learned to bend what shouldn't bend. You have to stop it before it starts. The recording ended there. Just static. Elias sat in the quiet hum of the lab, staring at the waveform on his screen. The timestamp read 1493 AD. He almost laughed. A medieval date, encoded in a futuristic machine, carrying a voice that sounded exactly like his own. He spent the rest of the night running tests, spectrographic analysis, voice pattern comparison. Every scan returned the same impossible result. A perfect match. Not similar, not approximate, identical. The man in the recording was him, but older. Weary in ways he couldn't yet understand. When morning came, he walked into the command atrium with the capsule under his arm. The other researchers barely looked up. They'd all seen anomalies before. Frozen satellites, forgotten drones, drifting archives of dead civilizations. But none of them spoke when he placed the recorder on the table. Wu authorized a retrieval from deep orbit. His supervisor asked. No one, Elias said. It was unregistered debris. They ran the usual scans. Radiation, thermal residue, molecular decay. All inconclusive. Every time someone touched the capsule, their instruments glitched, clocks skipping seconds forward and back again. By noon, the lab was silent. Everyone waited for him to say what they were all thinking. He didn't. He just stood there, staring at his reflection in the capsule's mirrored surface. For the first time in years, he didn't recognize the man looking back. That night, he went home and listened to the recording again. Each time, the static grew shorter, as if the message was repairing itself. More words emerged. The signal will come from the north. It's not a star. It's an opening. A wound in time itself. Inside the ice. There's an element that can close it. You'll know it when you see it. Send it to the sun. He paused the playback, hands trembling. The coordinates were clear. Latitude and longitude deep. Within the Arctic Circle. He opened a map. The location was uninhabited, untouched. A wasteland of ice and rock. No recorded mineral deposits. No stations. Nothing. He exhaled slowly. Some part of him wanted to believe this was all a trick. A test run by his department to see how far he'd follow a false signal. But deep down, something colder, older, whispered that it was real. And that whisper sounded exactly like him. 2 days later, the government came. They didn't knock. 3 black-clad officers stepped into his lab, flanked by a man in a gray suit. The man smiled politely, like someone arriving to deliver bad news at a funeral. Dadar. Kor, he said. You've recovered something classified. Elias frowned. Classified by who? By us, the man replied. They took the capsule without explaining. When Elias protested, the man's smile didn't move. He just said, "This is not for you." That night, Elias returned home to find his apartment door open. Nothing was stolen, but Every screen in the room flickered with static. And from somewhere inside that static, a single phrase looped on every monitor. They're listening. Don't stop. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. At dawn, he received a message from an unknown sender. Coordinates. A meeting point. When he arrived, he found a woman waiting. One of his old students, now working for the Internal Intelligence Division. She looked terrified. They think it's alien, she whispered. They think the capsule carries tech that can manipulate time itself. Elias stared at her. It's not alien. I know. That's why you need to disappear. Before he could ask how she knew, she handed him a small drive. Back up, she said. You'll need it. Then, she was gone. He went home, sealed the door, and inserted the drive. Inside were fragments of the same message he'd heard. But this version had something new at the end. They'll come for you. Don't let them use it. If they control the signal, they control history. The file ended abruptly. He sat there for a long time, staring at the drive, at the capsule, at his reflection in the dark window. He didn't realize he was crying until he heard himself whisper, I don't even know if I'm still me. Outside, sirens began to wail. Blue light spilled across the glass. He looked once at the recorder on his desk. Small, silent, unassuming. And understood what had to come next. He pocketed the drive, grabbed his coat, and stepped into the night. It was the last time anyone saw Dr. Elias Core alive. When they found him, 3 days later in his laboratory, there were no signs of struggle, no forced entry. Just a single line, etched into the desk beside the recorder. The future isn't ahead. It's beneath us, waiting. And the capsule was gone. Jonah Core never liked his father's silence. It filled rooms like fog. Soft, invisible, but impossible to breathe through. When Elias was alive, he'd sit for hours in the same chair, by the window, staring at nothing, lost in the space between thoughts. And when Jonah asked him what he was thinking about, his father would just smile and say, listening. The world speaks. If you stop trying to talk over it. He didn't understand what that meant until after the funeral. The report said suicide. An overdose, a mistake, a man too tired of chasing ghosts. But Jonah didn't buy it. His father didn't take mistakes lightly. Not in his work, not in his life. He was methodical, careful, borderline obsessive. A man who labeled his coffee jars by brew temperature would not overdose. So, Jonah broke into the old lab 2 nights after the funeral. The city had already sealed it for investigation. But old habits die hard, and his father had taught him enough about access codes to find his way in. The air smelled of metal and ozone. Every surface was wiped clean. Every monitor reset. Every file deleted. Except one. A single terminal still blinked softly in the corner, asking for a password. Jonah tried the usual ones: birthdays, coordinates, old project IDs. Nothing. Then, on instinct, he typed a phrase his father used to whisper when he thought Jonah was asleep. Future waits. The terminal unlocked, and there it was. A folder named simply ECHO. Inside, voice logs, scattered transcripts, and one corrupted audio file labeled Dionauti, PAY. Of course, he played it. The sound that filled the room was broken, static, laced, old. And beneath the distortion, a voice. If you're hearing this, it means I failed. They came for the capsule. I gave it to them. I had no choice. They said they'd hurt you. Jonah. I'm sorry. The voice cracked with static, then steadied again. But they can't hold it forever. There's something inside they don't understand. A frequency locked to blood. My blood. Yours. Jonah's breath caught. He leaned closer. Follow the pattern. The coordinates are embedded in the waveform. Don't let them use it. If they do, history ends twice. Then silence. And faintly, in the background, something like a heartbeat. Slow, rhythmic, fading. Jonah replayed the file again and again until dawn. Each time, he caught a different phrase, buried under the static. Fragmented instructions, like pieces of a broken map. When he finally left the lab, the sun was rising over the city, pale and cold, like light that had traveled too far to mean anything. He stood on the steps, eyes burning, and whispered to the morning air, "I'll finish it, Dad." Whatever it was. Days passed. He stopped going to work. He stopped answering calls. The apartment filled with notes, maps, fragments of equations his father once scribbled on napkins. He didn't eat much, didn't sleep at all, and slowly, the government came knocking again. This time for him. 2 men in suits showed up at his door. They smiled too much, asked too many questions that didn't sound like condolences. "Your father's work," one said. "Would like to take a look at anything he might have left with you." Jonah lied. "There's nothing." The man tilted his head. "That's strange. We have reason to believe he passed something down. Something very valuable." Jonah held his ground. "You've got the wrong guy." The men exchanged glances. One of them smiled thinly. "You look a lot like him, you know. Must have been hard losing him that way." Then they left. but the smile lingered like a scar. That night, his mother called. Her voice was small, tired. "Jonna, sweetie." Some men came by. They asked about your father's things. Is everything all right? He froze. His hands went cold around the phone. Did they say who they were? No. They just said they were old friends from the institute. He closed his eyes. Lock the doors, Mom. Don't open for anyone. Jonna. You're scaring me. Just promise me. There was silence on the line. Then a trembling, "Okay." He spent the next 24 hours packing. A laptop. A hard drive. A small silver box. His father once told him to keep in case of emergencies. It was sealed with a biometric lock, keyed to their family DNA. He hesitated before opening it, then pressed his thumb against the plate. The box hissed softly. Inside, a small cylindrical device. Old, burned at the edges. It looked exactly like the capsule in the old photos. And beside it, a folded note in his father's handwriting. They don't want to understand it. They want to own it. Don't let them. If I'm gone. Finish the message. Underneath the note was a string of coordinates. The Arctic Circle. By the time Jonna realized what he was holding, it was already too late. His apartment lights flickered once, then went dark. A shadow moved outside the window. Then another. He slipped the capsule and the drive into his backpack, climbed down the emergency stairwell, and vanished into the city before anyone could stop him. The government report would later describe him as unstable, potentially dangerous. A man consumed by his father's conspiracy theories. A risk to national security. But that night, under the cold glow of streetlights, Jonna Core wasn't dangerous. He was just a son, trying to understand why his father had to die. He sat in an all-night diner, laptop open, headphones in, replaying the message one last time. And there, between the words, hidden in the noise, he finally saw it. A spectrogram pattern. Lines forming shapes. Shapes forming coordinates. The same numbers from the note. He smiled. A small, exhausted smile that looked too much like his father's. "All right, Dad," he whispered. "I'm listening." Outside, a cold wind rose from the north, carrying the first scent of snow, the kind of wind that came before storms, before endings. Jonna looked up, eyes reflecting the city lights. He didn't know yet that the same sky would one day hold the trail of fire from the rocket he hadn't built yet. He only knew that somewhere out there, in the frozen silence, his father's voice was still waiting. And this time, he was ready to follow. They didn't grab him in the street. They didn't kick down a door or drag him into an unmarked van. That would have been too loud, too obvious, too much like the old days. They called him in. A nice, polite message in his inbox from the Office of Planetary Security. The kind of name that sounds like it exists to protect everyone, not to corner one man. It read, "We would like to clarify some details about your father's work. Your cooperation will help us close the case." Simple. Harmless. A request, not a demand. Jonah stared at it for a long time. Then he went. Because running too early made you look guilty. Because his mother was still in her house. Because there were still people he loved who could be touched if he didn't play along. The building was glass and steel and silence. Security scanners hummed gently as he walked through. The guards smiled, not friendly, not unfriendly. Just the professional calm of people who already knew everything about you. They took him to a room with no windows. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a screen mounted into the wall. The kind of room where conversations don't echo, because nothing in there is supposed to be remembered. A man in a gray suit entered, followed by a woman in dark blue. He recognized the man. Same one from his father's lab. Same controlled smile. Mr. Core, the man said, sitting. "Thank you for coming." "Did I have a choice?" Jonah asked. The man's smile didn't move. "Everyone has a choice. Yours can be easier than your father's." That landed. Jonah sat. The woman set a thin tablet on the table. "Your father recovered an object of unknown origin," she said. "You know this." "He told me about an anomaly," Jonah said carefully. "He didn't tell me he wasn't allowed to have it." The man folded his hands. "Your father was a brilliant man. He was also, let's say, overly cautious. He thought we wanted to misuse the technology. Don't you?" The man chuckled softly. "We want to understand it. That is all. A signal from outside our temporal range. Do you understand what that means? It means the universe is bigger than we knew. It means we are not done learning. We can't just let something like that go." "It wasn't from outside," Jonah said quietly. "It was from ahead." The woman's eyes flicked up. "So he did tell you," she said. Jonah cursed himself internally. He glanced at the screen on the wall. A photo appeared. Grainy, from lab cameras. 3 days before his father's death. Elias in the lab. The capsule on the table. The man tapped the table. And another image appeared. Jonah, 2 nights ago, inside the same lab. You broke into a sealed investigation site, the man said. Why? To get my father's things back. To get his message. The woman corrected. They knew. Of course they knew. Jonah stayed silent. The man sighed, like a teacher disappointed in a bright student. Jonah, he said, voice softening. We're not your enemy. Your father panicked. He was under pressure. We regret the outcome. You regret his death. We regret that he didn't trust us. Jonah felt anger rise, hot and immediate. He didn't trust you because you threatened us, he said. He told me. The woman leaned forward. He told you we threatened your family. Yes. Then, he lied. The calm way she said, it made it worse. We don't hurt people for information, she continued. We don't have to. We just adjust circumstances. What does that mean? It means, the man said, picking up smoothly, that we can make life very easy for the people you care about. Or we can make it complicated. Your mother still lives in South Sector 12. Right. Jonah went cold. She's elderly, alone, vulnerable. The man went on. We don't want anything to happen to her. There's no need for this, Jonah said through his teeth. Correct, the man replied. There is no need. If we work together. Silence stretched. Then, the woman slid the tablet across the table. On, it was a spectrogram. Elias's message, mid-static. What have 81% of it, she said. Your father had the rest. You took it. I don't have it, Jonah said. The man smiled again. Don't lie. Your father was good. You're not him yet. Jonah stayed quiet. The woman pressed. What was in the last 19%? He shook his head. The man sighed. Jonah, the message was about time collapse. We know that much. It referenced a northern coordinate, an energy source. Do you understand what that implies? It implies you're going to weaponize it. It implies, the man said, patience thinning, that if there really is a temporal wound forming near Earth's orbit, we are the only ones with the resources to deal with it. Not some dead researcher, not his 20-something son. Jonah's jaw clenched. You said yourself. The man went on. It was from the future. That means future humanity sent it back, so we could act. So we could act. Not you. If you keep pieces of it to yourself, you're not protecting humanity. You're delaying it. Jonah looked up then, eyes steady. My father said, if you get all of it, you'll control history. The man's smile vanished. The room cooled. The woman tapped the screen again. A new image appeared. His mother, at her kitchen table, drinking tea. A security drone floating outside the window. "Cooperate," the woman said quietly. "She won't even know we were ever watching." He stared at the image for a long time. Then he exhaled. "Fine," he said. "I'll give you the rest." But they didn't let him walk out afterward. They took him to a holding facility 4 levels below. No bars, no chains. Just a room with smooth walls and soft light. The kind of place built not to punish, but to wait you out. He sat there for hours. Hours turned to evening. Evening to night. No one came. He used the time. He pulled the small drive from inside his boot. The one he'd never shown them. His father's backup. He plugged it into the room's console. The screen flickered to life. His father's face appeared, tired, rushed. The way he must have looked the night he died. "If they have you," Elias said, "means I couldn't stop them. It also means they still don't understand the last part." "Good. Listen to me, Jonah. Don't let them launch. From here. The element has to go straight to the sun. Not be studied. Not be reversed. Not be kept. In our future. In the one I came from." The element was gone. It was mined out before we knew what it was. That's why I had to send this back. To a time when it still existed. You're in that time. You have to do what I couldn't. Jonah swallowed hard. "They'll tell you they want to save the world." His father went on. "Maybe some of them do. But nations don't save worlds, Jonah. People do. One person. Doing the thing no one else is willing to do." The recording glitched, then continued, softer. "I wish I could tell you this doesn't end with you in a cell. I wish I could tell you I survived. But you already know." The video cut. Jonah sat back, breathing hard. There was no more doubt. The government didn't want to stop the collapse. They wanted to own the thing that could. He stood and tested the walls. No visible doors. Just the glass panel that sealed him in. He stared at it. Then, from the ceiling, a voice. "You're not going to get out, Mr. Core." He looked up at the camera, in the corner. "You already got what you wanted." Jonah said, "Why keep me?" "Insurance," the voice said. "In case the data is incomplete." "It is incomplete." Jonah lied. "You still don't have the launch key." There was a pause. Then, the voice said, "Launch key." Jonah smiled. "You really didn't get it, did you?" "Explain," the voice said. "You have the coordinates," Jonah said. "You have the element location. But you don't have the activation string." The message wasn't just "send it" to the sun. It was encrypted, with a personal cipher. My father's. Mine. You'll give it to us, the voice said. Or your mother. You touch her, Jonah said. Calm now. And I erase everything. Another pause. Then. You can't erase it from our servers. I can erase it from your version, Jonah said. And the part you don't have is useless, without the part I gave you. The voice went silent. Jonah walked back to the console and began typing. His father had left him one more gift. A backdoor into the systems he used to work on. Still active. Still loyal. He found the facility's internal grid. Mapped it. Located his room. Located the power relays. He smiled. You hear this, Dad? He whispered. I'm doing the stupid thing. Then he killed the lights. Darkness swallowed the room. Emergency power kicked in a second later. Red. Dim. Slow. Blinking. In the confusion, doors down the hall hissed open. He wasn't the only one detained here. He stepped out, blending into the chaos. Guards shouting, alarms cycling. Doors locking and unlocking as the system tried to reboot. Someone grabbed him, then let go when another siren shrieked. He moved fast. Up 2 levels. Past a security station. Into the service corridor. He was almost at the exit when he heard it. Jenna. He turned. His mother. Standing in the corridor. Escorted. Confused. Eyes searching. They'd brought her in. To pressure him. To leverage him. He ran to her, pulled her into the maintenance room. Mum, listen to me, he said, voice shaking. You have to go home. Don't talk to anyone. Don't open the door. Jonah! What is happening? She asked, voice cracking. Why are they keeping us here? Why aren't they telling me what your father was working on? Because he was right. Jonah said. And because they want it. Tears filled her eyes. You sound like him. I know. He held her for a second longer than he could afford. Then he pulled away. I have to go north, he said. If they ask. You don't know anything. She grabbed his hand. Will you come back? He looked at her. Really looked. And saw how fragile she was now. How many years his father's work had taken from both of them. I'll try, he said. It was the closest thing to truth he had. He left the facility through a freight bay. Snow hit his face like pins. He didn't look back. Behind him, the government would clean up the mess. Restore the power, rewrite the logs. They would watch him from orbit, from street cameras, from transaction records. But he had the last piece. The activation string. The part even his father had refused to say out loud. He had the coordinates. He had the capsule. And he had his father's stubbornness. North, then. To the ice. To the place where the future had reached backward. He pulled his coat tighter and headed toward the transport docks. Above, the clouds rolled in. Heavy, metallic, almost listening. The shadow of the state followed him. But so did his father's voice. The cold came first. A kind of cold that didn't just live on the skin. It lived inside the bones. The world up here had no sound, no motion. Only breath and ice and the slow rhythm of things that had long ago given up on being alive. Jonah Kor stepped off the transport onto the frozen plain and felt, for the first time, what loneliness really meant. The Arctic Circle wasn't just empty, it was erased. Even the satellites seemed to avoid it. A white expanse, untouched, unrecorded, unmapped. He looked at the handheld scanner. The signal was faint, but constant. A pulse buried deep beneath the ice, repeating at perfect intervals, like a heartbeat buried under centuries. Pulse. Pause. Pulse. Pause. He walked. Each step cracked the ice with a sound too small for the sky. Every direction looked the same. Only the coordinates on his visor kept him moving. When he finally reached the spot, there was nothing, just snow. Flat, unbroken, featureless. He stood there, breathing clouds into the air, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then, faintly, his scanner flickered. A second signal appeared, vertical. Below him, he knelt, brushed away the snow, and saw a faint glimmer beneath the ice. A glow so soft it could have been imagined. The capsule responded to it immediately. The small metal device his father had left behind began to hum in his pocket, its surface warming against the cold. He took it out. The light beneath the ice brightened, answering. He hesitated, then placed the capsule on the ground. A pulse of light rippled outward, circular, perfect. The snow blew away, as if pushed by invisible hands. The ground split open. A seam of light cutting through the ice, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. Jonah took a slow breath. "All right, Dad," he whispered. "Let's see what you wanted me to find." And he went down. The descent felt endless. Each step echoed with metallic resonance, not like stone, but like something built. The walls weren't carved. They were grown. Smooth, black, seamless. Technology so old it looked natural. At the bottom, a single chamber waited, circular, silent. In its center stood a crystalline structure the size of a human heart, suspended above a column of frozen light. It pulsed in time with his heartbeat. The air vibrated. Jonah took a cautious step forward. When he was close enough, the crystal shifted, splitting into thousands of threads that moved like tendrils of light. They surrounded him, scanning, measuring. Then, a sound. Not a voice. Not words. Something between a hum and a whisper. Blood signature confirmed. He froze. The words didn't come through air. They came through him. His bones vibrated with them. Genetic line verified. Elias core matched. Authorization transferred. And then, from the center of the light, a familiar sound emerged. His father's voice. Jonah. If you're hearing this, it means you made it. Jonah's breath caught. You're standing in what the world forgot. An artifact, older than civilization itself. The element you're looking at isn't a rock. It's a living pattern. A stabilizer for time itself. When it's destroyed, reality begins to slip. Small at first, then faster, until entire centuries collapse. The voice paused, static weaving through it. They'll tell you it's alien. It's not. It's human. Or what humans became. Long after, we stopped recognizing ourselves. We built this to keep the flow steady. But in my time, it's gone. That's why I sent the message back. Because only now does it still exist. Jonah stepped closer to the crystal. Its surface rippled like water. Beneath his reflection, you'll see a panel near the base, his father continued. Inside it, a launch key. Take it. You'll need it when the time comes. Jonah found it, exactly where the voice said it would be. A small metallic cylinder, cool and weightless. He turned it in his hand, watching light crawl across its surface. One more thing, Elias said, voice softening. Don't trust them. Not the government. Not anyone. You'll think you need help, but the more people know, the faster the wrong ones find you. This isn't about saving the world for everyone else. It's about finishing what we started. The message ended. Jonah stood in the silence that followed, his father's words echoing like a second pulse in his skull. He looked around the chamber, at the light, the ice, the impossible structure that felt like a memory instead of a place. Time stabilizer, he whispered. And you want me to throw it into the sun? He almost laughed. It sounded insane. It was insane. But then he remembered the data his father left. The projections. The collapse rates. The decaying orbit of the temporal field. If he did nothing, the fracture would spread. The sky itself would tear. He exhaled slowly. Wes, I'm going to need a rocket. He returned to the surface hours later, frost clinging to his lashes. The sky had turned pale blue, the kind of color that looks like it could break. Far to the south, the faint glow of civilization blinked on the horizon. Distant, indifferent. Jonah loaded the capsule, the key, and a fragment of the crystal into a sealed case. Then, he sent a single message through, a secure channel to the only person left he could trust. I need a team. No questions. South Launch Base. Midnight. The reply came 3 minutes later. You're out of your mind. I'm in, he smiled. Some things never changed. By the time he reached the transport station, his face was already on government watch lists. Security drones scanned every traveler, their red eyes sweeping the crowd like searching for ghosts. He kept his head down. He'd changed his ID twice that morning, his face once. The hardest part wasn't hiding. It was carrying the weight. The small case in his backpack seemed to hum softly, like a heartbeat out of sync with his own. He could feel it pulsing against his spine, quiet, alive, patient. He didn't know if it was a gift or a curse. Only that it was his now, his inheritance. As the transport broke through the upper atmosphere, Jonah looked out the window. Earth curved below him. Blue, fragile, beautiful in ways he had never noticed before. He wondered if his father had looked at it the same way before sending his final message. If he had known how small all of this looked from above. He whispered to the window, to the stars, to the ghost in his blood. Don't worry, Dad. I'll finish it. The capsule hummed faintly in reply. That night, the world government issued a red alert. Subject to Jonah, core, fugitive, potential biohazard carrier. They didn't know where he was heading, but they knew what he was carrying. And by the time they realized where he was going, he was already gone. Chasing the one place that could still reach the sun. The facility didn't exist on any map. It was a forgotten installation built during the early exploration era. Before the solar wars. Before the treaties, when nations still dreamed of owning the stars. Now, it lay buried beneath the snow and silence of the north, its metal bones creaking against the cold. Jonah Core and his small team reached it 3 nights after the message. There were 5 of them. Engineers, old colleagues of his father. Skipped. People who owed the Core name more than they cared to admit. Each came for different reasons: loyalty, guilt, curiosity. But they all stayed for the same one. Because something about Jonah's conviction felt bigger than him. The entrance hatch was sealed under 2 meters of ice. They cut through it with thermal drills, until the lock gave way with a sigh that echoed like breath. The air inside was stale, metallic. Dust floated in zero-gravity pockets where the air vents had frozen decades ago. Lights flickered to life one by one, reluctant but obedient. The station groaned awake. Jonah stepped into the command deck and looked around. It felt like walking into a grave built for machines. Control panels slept beneath frost. Monitors blinked with faint, blue lines of old code. And every surface was covered in a thin layer of ice. Like the place had been waiting for him. He turned to the others. "This is it," he said. The old launch grid. A man named Brant, the eldest of the group, snorted softly. "You're saying we can fire from here? It's been dead for 40 years. Jonah nodded toward the still, glowing terminals. Not dead. Just forgotten. They got to work. For hours. The station, filled with the hum of power cells, waking from their long sleep. Cables sparked. Screens flickered. Somewhere deep in the structure, engines coughed like something trying to remember how to breathe. Brant wiped frost from a console. "How exactly are we doing this, Jonah? You planning to just launch a piece of rock into the sun?" Jonah unzipped the case. Inside, the crystal pulsed with a soft, steady light, blue and gold shifting like living fire. Even in the dimness, it painted the walls in color. "This isn't a rock," Jonah said. "It's the same element my father found. It's stable until it's not." The message said, "It has to be sent directly into the solar core." Brant frowned. "And if it's not?" "Then time folds in on itself. Reality collapses. The same cycle he came from begins again." One of the younger engineers, a woman named Ray, whispered, "And you believe that?" Jonah met her eyes. "I believe him." She hesitated, then nodded. Belief was all they had left. Hours turned into days. The team worked without sleep, fueled by canned rations and quiet urgency. The old systems resisted at first. Cracked lines, dead relays, rusted guidance servos. But Jonah coaxed them back to life, piece by piece. Every repair felt like an act of resurrection. He could feel his father's presence in the schematics. The way the code was written. The structure of the launch software. It was his handwriting, hidden in the language of machines. On the third night, when the systems finally aligned, the countdown grid lit up across the wall. The launch bay rumbled beneath their feet, a giant awakening under the ice. Brant stared at the screen. "You're serious? You're actually going to fire it?" Jonah looked at him, exhausted but sure. "If I don't, no one will." Ray approached quietly, her breath fogging in the cold air. "What if your father was wrong?" Jonah smiled faintly. "Then at least I tried to make him right." Outside, the storm began. Snow fell in thick, endless waves, howling through the metal corridors like ghosts. The power flickered but held. The crystal, their payload, was now sealed inside the launch core, suspended in a containment field that hummed softly, almost like a living heartbeat. Jonah stood before it, one hand resting on the glass. Through the hum, through the cold, he thought. He heard his father's voice again. "You'll know when it's time." He whispered back, "I think it's now." They gathered in the command deck. The systems showed green across every board. Thrusters, trajectory, ignition. All except one, the launch lockout. It required a code, a phrase. Jonah's father had called it the activation string. The room went silent as Jonah pulled a small chip from his pocket, the one he'd taken from the Arctic chamber. He slotted it into the terminal. The system asked for verification. He hesitated only a moment, then typed 3 words. "Future waits still." The system paused. Then the lockout turned green. A quiet alarm chimed. The countdown began. Brant stared at him. "Jonah, we're not authorized for this. The launch will trigger every satellite in orbit. They'll come for us." "They're already coming," Jonah said. Ray's voice trembled. "What if the element destabilizes before it reaches the sun? Then we end faster." Silence followed. The kind of silence where everyone chooses whether they want to live in fear or die. With purpose. And one by one, they nodded. The clock hit T, minus 30 seconds. The ground shook as ancient engines roared beneath the station. Monitors glowed bright, illuminating their faces like ghosts. Through the glass of the command deck, Jonah saw the ice split open, revealing the tip of the old launch shaft. A tower of light piercing through the storm. Snow and fire mixed in the air. 20 seconds. Brant crossed himself. Ray whispered a prayer. Jonah stared at the monitor. His father's name still blinking on one of the dormant channels. 10 seconds. The radio crackled. A voice cutting through the static. "Government channel. This is Central Command. You are in violation of Planetary Code 17. Abort immediately. Repeat, abort immediately, or we will." Jonah reached forward and killed the feed. 5 seconds. He whispered, "For you, Dad." 4. The storm outside turned blinding white. 3. The hum of the engines deepened, a sound too low for human ears. 2. The station trembled, lights flickering in rhythm with the heartbeat of the crystal. 1. A column of light erupted into the sky. The rocket tore upward, slicing through the storm, vanishing into the clouds like a spear thrown at God. The sound hit them. Seconds later, a deep, rolling thunder that made the metal groan. The snow melted on the surface. Flash, frozen steam, rising around the launch tower. Jonah didn't cheer. He just stood there, staring at the empty sky, chest heaving, eyes wet. Ray whispered, "It's gone." He nodded. "Not yet," he said quietly. "It's on its way." In orbit, military satellites pivoted. Tracking systems locked. Missiles armed. A voice crackled over secure channels. Target confirmed. Unauthorized launch. Prepare interception. The sky filled with fire. The world below trembled as counter rockets streaked upward. A rain of light chasing a single streak headed toward the sun. Jonah watched the radar. One by one, the signals converged. Then the feed went white. The explosion lit the horizon, brighter than dawn. The shockwave hit a minute later, rattling the station's bones, scattering frost from the ceiling like snow inside a snow globe. The power flickered. Silence fell. Brant looked at him, face pale. Was that? Jonah didn't answer. He just stared at the white sky, where the rocket had vanished, waiting for a sign. Then, faintly, the instruments flickered back on. Telemetry data poured in. Velocity. Altitude. Still climbing. The rocket had survived. It had made it through. Jonah exhaled, a laugh breaking through his chest. Half relief, half disbelief. It's going to make it, Ray whispered. Jonah nodded. For now. But deep below the station, in the ice, something else began to stir. A low, harmonic vibration that spread through the frozen ground, reaching out like a pulse searching for its missing heart. And miles above, orbiting in silence, a transmission began to loop through every government channel. You can't stop what's already begun. The sky didn't calm for 3 days. Every screen on Earth flickered with light that wasn't sunlight. Communication grids failed, then rebooted, then failed again. Air traffic halted. Oceans pulsed with strange tides. People looked up and saw colors they couldn't name, spreading across the clouds. Slow, silent, like bruises forming in the sky. And everywhere, one name echoed across the feeds. Joaquar, the fugitive, the saboteur. The terrorist who hijacked a forgotten launch base and fired a classified payload into the sun. Governments released statements. Spokesmen called it an act of unprovoked aggression. The networks repeated the story until it stopped sounding like a story and started sounding like truth. Jonah's face glowed on every screen. Age 28. Son of the late Dr. Elias Kaur. Wanted in connection with multiple counts of espionage, bioterrorism, and high-scale sabotage. They said he had stolen state secrets, that he'd unleashed a radiation flare into the upper atmosphere, that he was responsible for the auroras that now rippled over cities where no auroras should exist. No one mentioned why he had done it. No one mentioned what he had saved. He watched it all from an abandoned freight vessel drifting off the northern coast. The crew had been paid to ask no questions. They followed his instructions. Sail south. Stay off radar. Wait for silence. Silence came. But it wasn't peace. Every night, he sat in the cargo bay, watching the feeds on a small, cracked tablet. The same footage looped endlessly. The launch, the explosion, the fiery trail cutting through the storm. His storm, his father's dream. The world thought it had witnessed disaster. They didn't see the rocket clearing, the blast. They didn't see the capsule stabilizing in orbit. They didn't see the elements still moving, alive, accelerating toward the sun. He knew, because he still felt it. The connection hadn't broken. It pulsed faintly under his skin, a quiet rhythm in his blood. Slower now, but steady, as if the element was still talking to him. "Hey." A voice called from behind. Ray stood in the doorway, bundled in a worn jacket, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. She carried 2 mugs of instant coffee. "You're gonna burn your eyes out watching that," she said. He didn't look up. Already did. She set the mug beside him. The metal floor creaked beneath their weight. "Telemetry's still reading," she said, quietly. "Whatever we sent, it's still moving." "I know." She studied him for a moment. "You're not sleeping." He smiled without humor. "Didn't sleep much before this either, Jonna." He finally turned to her. Her face was pale in the cold light, but her eyes were warm. "Do you ever wonder," she said, "if maybe he wasn't right? If maybe we just sent something we don't understand into a star?" He looked back at the screen. "Every minute." "Then, why do you look so sure?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Because for the first time in my life, the world isn't falling apart yet." That night, he couldn't stay still. He climbed to the deck, stood against the freezing wind, and looked up. The sky was still alive. Ribbons of violet and blue swirling across the horizon. And, deep among those lights, he saw a faint streak cutting across the stars. Barely visible, but unmistakably there. The rocket, still burning, He closed his eyes. "Keep going," he whispered. The wind answered with silence. At dawn, the ship's radio crackled for the first time in days. A scrambled signal pushed through static. Brant's voice. "Jonah, they found the base. Everyone's gone. They're saying we're part of a network. They're calling it the core cult." Jonah closed his eyes. The state always needed a story simple enough to hate. Brant continued, voice shaking. "They know about the Arctic chamber. They're sending teams north. You have to move." "Where?" Jonah asked. "Anywhere they can't see." Static swallowed the rest. He turned to Ray. "They'll track us through the port registry. We need to vanish." She frowned. "And go where?" "South. The desert. Too much heat interference for their satellites." "Jonah." He cut her off. "If the element reaches the sun, the collapse ends. But if they intercept the signal before it stabilizes..." Ray finished the sentence for him. "It starts again." He nodded. "So we run until it's done." They traveled for weeks under false names. Freight ships, desert trains, safe houses that smelled of dust and oil. Everywhere they went, Jonah saw his own face, staring back from news bulletins and wanted posters. "The menbuch rawai. Tuotoyuh. Teach sun. T devl. Eamh. Med. Skiatistis. Cn." He stopped counting how many times he saw the word terrorist. Each repetition cut a little less. By the time they reached the southern wastelands, his name had already become legend. A bedtime story for a terrified world. Some believed he had destroyed half the atmosphere. Others said he'd opened a hole in the sun. No one believed he'd saved them. They hid in an old weather relay tower on the edge of the dunes. The building creaked with every wind, gust, its antennas long broken, its walls scarred by sand and time. But it was safe. For now. Jonah spread maps across the table, tracing the projected trajectory of the rocket. According to his calculations, it should have reached the solar corona within 12 days. It had been 13. Ray stood beside him, watching his hands shake slightly. What if it didn't make it? He didn't look up. Then everything I've done means nothing. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You did what he couldn't. That has to count for something. He stared at the map, the lines, the numbers. Saving the world doesn't count if the world never knows it was in danger. She smiled softly. Maybe it's better that way. He almost smiled back. Almost. That night, the hum returned. It started as a faint vibration in his chest, then spread outward like warmth through water. He woke up, gasping. Ray stirred beside the radio equipment. "Jonah." He didn't answer. He just grabbed the transmitter and tuned to the same frequency that had haunted his family for decades. Then, faintly, a pulse, not random, structured, alive. Ray leaned closer. "Is that?" He nodded slowly. "It's the rocket." The signal grew stronger, repeating every 7 seconds. And beneath it, hidden in the modulation, a voice. Faint, barely there, like a ghost pressed against the edges of time. Trajectory. Stable, entering solar orbit. Jonah's hands trembled. He turned up the volume. Containment. Holding. Core temperature nominal. Pattern integrity. Then static. A burst of sound. A final whisper. "Goodbye, Jonah." The radio went silent. Jonah stared at it. The words sinking into him like cold water. He didn't know if it was a computer voice, an echo of his father, or something else entirely. He only knew that it sounded grateful. He leaned back against the wall, exhaling shakily. "It's done," he whispered. "It made it." Ray smiled faintly. "Then we did it." But Jonah's expression didn't ease. He was still listening. To the silence. To the space beyond silence. Because somewhere inside that silence, he thought he heard something else. A second pulse. Fainter. Slower. Not from the rocket. From Earth. By the next morning, the news broke. Unexplained solar activity. The headlines read. Solar radiation had dropped to near perfect balance. Weather systems stabilized. The auroras faded. For the first time in decades, the planet was quiet. And still, Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He stood outside, the desert stretching endless and gold before him, and whispered to the horizon, "You did it, Dad. We did it." He waited for the hum to return, for the familiar warmth in his blood. But there was nothing now. No pulse. No echo. It was over. He turned back toward the shelter. And didn't see the drone watching from above. That evening, a global broadcast interrupted every channel. The government declared the core incident officially contained. Jonah Core was listed as at large. His crimes against world order and safety. The narrator's voice was calm, almost kind. The world owes its stability to the swift action of our planetary defense forces who prevented catastrophic destabilization. The perpetrator remains wanted for acts of terror. Jonah watched it with quiet disbelief. Ray muted the screen. "They're rewriting it already." He nodded slowly. "That's what they do best." "What do we do now?" Jonah looked out the window. eyes fixed on the dying sunlight. Now, we disappear. That night, as the last rays faded, he packed his bag. Ray stopped him. "Where will you go?" He smiled, tired but sure. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere they won't find me." "Jonna," he paused. "You don't have to. Come." She looked at him for a long time, then shook her head. "I think you'll need someone to remind you. It was worth it." He laughed softly. "Yeah, maybe I will." They left before dawn, walking into the desert as the first light touched the sand. The same sun that now carried the last piece of the future inside it. Somewhere above, in orbit, the remnants of the launch array blinked one last time, then went dark. But in the deep, invisible layers of the sun, something pulsed. A rhythm older than time, steady and human. For 6 months, Jonah Core lived without a name. He traded identity, chips like other men, traded cigarettes. Sometimes, he was a freight technician in the desert corridors. Sometimes a mechanic on orbital lifters. Once, for 2 weeks, he was dead. At least according to the records. He didn't mind. Being nobody was safer than being Jonah Core. The government had turned his story into mythology. Now, the Core conspiracy. A man who hijacked a solar weapon, who threatened humanity, who died in exile. They showed photos of the frozen launch site, cratered and black, and said, "This is what he left behind." The world moved on. People always do. But the sky had changed. The sun burned cleaner. Weather patterns normalized. And no one asked why. No one wondered what had really happened. Except him. Every dawn, Jonah woke before the light touched the horizon. He'd watch the sun rise. Calm, balanced, beautiful. And he'd whisper, "You made it?" Sometimes he swore he heard something answer, faintly, beneath the hum of the world. A pulse. A breath. A memory of his father's voice. But memory wasn't enough. Not when the past had been rewritten. The day it ended began like all the others. Quiet, unremarkable, tired. He and Ray had taken shelter in an abandoned signal relay north of New Jakarta. The air outside shimmered with heat. Inside, the hum of old generators filled the silence between them. Ray was at the console, tuning through dead frequencies. Jonah was at the window, watching drones drift across the horizon like flies. "They're sweeping wider," she said softly. He nodded. "They won't find us." "Not yet." "You've been saying not yet for 6 months." He smiled faintly. Still true. Ray turned in her chair. "We can't keep hiding. You could tell them the truth, Jonah. You could show them your father's data. Let the world decide. He looked at her for a long time. The way you look at someone who still believes in things. Truth doesn't matter to them, he said, quietly. They already decided what I am. A terrorist. He nodded. And if I tell them the truth, I'll just be a liar with better stories. Ray sighed. Then what's left? He turned back to the window. The sun's still burning, right? That's enough. That night, he woke to the sound of engines. Not distant. Close. He bolted upright. The room flashed with blue light. Search beams, cutting through the cracks in the walls. Ray grabbed her pack. They found us. Jonah didn't answer. He was already moving. Collecting the drives, the capsule's remnants, anything that still mattered. Outside, the hum grew louder. Hovercrafts. Boots hitting sand. Voices through radios. He turned to Ray. Go through the east tunnel. Don't stop. What about you? I'll buy you time. No. He grabbed her shoulders, eyes fierce. If they get you, everything dies with us. You're the only one who can decode the solar feed. Now, go. She hesitated, then kissed his forehead. Quick, trembling. Don't make me regret leaving. He smiled faintly. I won't. She ran. He turned to face the door as it blew inward. Armed soldiers flooded the room, their visors glowing cold white. Jonah raised his hand slowly. Don't move, one barked. He didn't. Another soldier stepped forward, scanning his face. Then lowered the weapon slightly. Confirmed. Jonah Core. The lead officer's voice came through the comms, calm and clear. Alive. Secure him. They cuffed his hands, dragged him through the dust, and pushed him into a waiting transport. No one spoke. No one explained. The craft rose into the night, engines rumbling like distant thunder. Through the window, Jonah watched the horizon fade. Endless sand, then clouds, then the black curve of the world. He didn't fight. He'd been running for too long. They took him to the capital, to a place made of glass and silence, a building with no name, a cell with no clock, days blurred. They asked questions he didn't answer. They asked them again. And again. Sometimes he slept. Sometimes he didn't. It didn't matter anymore. Until one morning, a familiar voice woke him. Mr. Core. He looked up. The man in the gray suit stood by the door. Older now, but the same faint smile. Jonah smiled back, tired. I was wondering when you'd show up. The man nodded toward the guard, who stepped outside. Then he took the chair opposite Jonah. You've been hard to find. Jonah shrugged. I wasn't hiding. just living somewhere you weren't. The man chuckled softly. You always were your father's son. Jonah's expression hardened. He died because of you. The man tilted his head. He died because he made a choice. Just like you. Jonah leaned forward. So what now? You going to kill me too? The man smiled. Why would we? You did exactly what we needed. Jonah frowned. What are you talking about? The element. The man said. The launch. The stabilization. The world didn't collapse, Jonah. It worked. You fixed it. Jonah stared at him. Then why am I in a cell? The man's smile faded. Because you don't understand what you've done. He stood, walking slowly toward the glass wall. When the element entered the solar core, it didn't just stabilize the temporal field. It merged with it. You didn't save the world. You changed it. He turned back to Jonah. Do you know how many governments would kill for control over that energy, over time itself? Jonah's stomach turned cold. That's what this is about. The man nodded. It always was. Jonah laughed once. Bitter. You never wanted to stop the collapse. You wanted to own it. The man didn't deny it. He simply said, and now, thanks to you, we do. That night, they moved him. No explanation. No trial. Just a black transport and a destination he didn't know. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the city lights. Clean, perfect, unscarred. The world looked peaceful, almost holy. He wondered if anyone down there would ever know what it had cost to keep it that way. The guard beside him glanced up. Do you ever regret it? Jonah looked at him. Which part? Saving the world. He smiled faintly. Depends on whose world it is. The guard said nothing after that. When the transport landed, the air was cold again. They led him through a corridor lined with mirrored walls until they reached a room that looked more like a museum than a cell. In the center stood a display case. Inside it, glowing softly, was the fragment of the element. Jonah froze. He could feel it pulsing again, faint, alive. The man in gray entered behind him. You see, still beautiful. Jonah turned slowly. You said it merged with the sun. By it did. The man replied. But a fragment always returns to its source. Call it gravitational memory. Jonah stared at the crystal. You're experimenting on it. The man's smile returned. We're learning from it. You gave us the key, Jonah. Now we can open every door. Jonah shook his head. You're going to destroy everything. Maybe, the man said softly. But that's what progress looks like. He turned to leave. Rest. You'll have visitors soon. The world wants to see its savior. The door closed behind him. Jonah stood there, staring at the crystal. Its light reflected in his eyes. Steady, rhythmic, pulsing. He reached out, fingertips brushing the glass. A jolt of warmth ran through him. The same warmth he'd felt years ago when he touched the capsule for the first time. And from somewhere deep inside the light, he heard a voice. Soft. Familiar. It's not over. His breath caught. He whispered, "Dad." The light pulsed once. Brighter. You can still finish it. Jonah looked up at the cameras above him. The guards watching. The world waiting. He smiled faintly. Then let's finish it. The world had gone quiet again. That kind of quiet that never lasts. Somewhere above the clouds, the sun burned clean and perfect. Down below, in a glass room buried beneath the Capitol, Jonah Core stared at the thing that had rewritten his life. The fragment glowed in its containment cradle, pulsing softly, almost breathing. Each pulse seemed slower now. Each flicker a little dimmer. It was dying. Jonah pressed his hand against the glass. The warmth bled into his skin. A whisper followed. Not yet. He closed his eyes. No. The room's door hissed open. Footsteps echoed on the polished floor. The man in the gray suit entered again, flanked by 2 guards. His smile was the same. Polite, practiced, hollow. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, glancing at the light. Like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. Jonah didn't turn. You shouldn't have taken it out. Why not? We're studying it. We've stabilized the chamber. The energy output. Jonah faced him. It's not stable. It's holding the wound closed. Every time you pull energy from it, you reopen it. The man chuckled softly. And yet the sky hasn't fallen. Not yet, Jonah said. The man's smile faded. Still the prophet. I see. I'm just the idiot who finished what my father started. He stepped closer to the glass, eyes reflecting the pulse. And I'm the one watching you ruin it. The man leaned against the rail. Do you know what history will call you, Jonah? Not a terrorist. Not a savior. Something in between. The man who proved time could be rewritten. Jonah's voice was calm. Time isn't a toy. It's a resource, the man replied. And we intend to use it. He turned toward the door. Enjoy the view while you can. Tomorrow you'll tell the world what we want them to hear. The door slid shut. Locks hissed into place. The hum of the crystal deepened, like a slow inhale. Jonah waited until the footsteps faded. Then he moved. He pulled the small, metallic disc from his sleeve. One of the many things he'd kept hidden since the Arctic. A shard of his father's original drive. It fit perfectly into the access port beside the containment cradle. The crystal pulsed brighter, responding to its own memory. Light crawled across the walls. Circuits that hadn't been used in decades came alive, glowing with the same rhythm. A voice filled the room. Elias Core. Access recognized. Jonah smiled faintly. Close enough. He typed fast. Bypassing layers of security, his father's code, still outranked. Every door in the lab sealed shut. Every feed went dark. Above him, alarms began to sound. Containment, breach detected. He didn't stop. He was rewriting the output path, rerouting the fragment's energy through the old launch protocols, still hidden deep in the government network. The same system his father had once helped design. The crystal brightened, flickering gold, white now, like a small sun trapped in glass. Jana. The whisper again, clearer this time, vibrating through the air. He froze. Dad, you have one chance. He exhaled slowly. What happens if I fail? Then we start over. Again. He nodded. Then, I won't fail. The guards broke through the outer door. Their boots thundered down the corridor. He could hear the man in gray shouting orders. Seal the chamber! Don't let him. Jonah hit the final key. The glass walls went transparent. The crystal's light expanded, flooding the room with brilliance so pure it erased every shadow. He stepped forward, into it. The warmth hit him like water, heavy, luminous, infinite. He could feel everything at once: the hum of the machines, the pull of gravity, the pulse of the sun miles above. It was all one thing, one rhythm. Jana, anchor the thread. His father's voice again, clearer now, inside his mind. How? Through you. He didn't understand until he felt it. The connection forming. The light burrowing beneath his skin, threading through his veins, sensing his heartbeat to the crystal's pulse. He was the stabilizer now. The bridge. Alarms screamed. The glass cracked. Energy poured outward like liquid fire. The man in gray shouted something. Distant, meaningless. The guards fell back, shielding their eyes. Jonah barely heard them. He was somewhere else now. Somewhere between light and memory. He saw his father standing in a corridor of fire, smiling that tired smile. You did it. Jonah shook his head. Not yet. Then finish it. The light surged. In orbit, satellites went blind. Cameras melted. Every transmission filled with static. And then, for exactly 7 seconds, every human being who looked at the sun saw something inside it. A shape, a figure, a man standing in the light. And then it was gone. The sky cleared. The auroras vanished. The world steadied. Time, once again, began to flow forward, unbroken. When the light faded, the glass room was empty. The containment cradle was cracked open, the fragment gone. Only a faint burn mark on the floor remained, shaped like a human silhouette. The man in the gray suit stood in the doorway, staring at it. His reflection trembled in the remaining shards of glass. "Get me a recovery team," he said. His voice was calm, almost reverent. The guard hesitated. "Sir, there's nothing left to recover." The man's eyes flicked toward the sun through the window. For the first time, he didn't smile. Then, maybe that's the point. Months passed. The world learned to live in peace with a sun that no longer misbehaved. Energy grids stabilized. Weather balanced. People forgot. Jonah Kor's name was buried in archives, sealed under 1,000 official reports. He became a ghost, a rumor, a myth, but sometimes, at dusk, when the light hit the clouds, just right, people swore they could hear a hum beneath the wind. Faint, steady, rhythmic. A heartbeat. Far from Earth, deep within the solar corona, something moved. A flicker of consciousness woven into the plasma. Watching, listening. It remembered the shape of hands, the sound of laughter, the warmth of a father's voice. It remembered being human. And when the sun flared, the light whispered through the void. Future waits, still